From Chicago's CAN TV, this is Chicago Newsroom.
Well, hi there. Welcome to Chicago Newsroom right here on CAN TV. I'm Ken Davis, and we're talking about a variety of things today on the program. But first of all, let's get started with something that union supporters love to say. Do you like your 40-hour work week, the 5-day work week? Well, thank a union, right? But today, as union representation in the private sector is shrinking to, I would say, almost irrelevance, the discussion is very, very different. Instead of miners and millers standing up and demanding 8 hours for work, 8 hours for sleep, and 8 hours to do with as we please, the battle today is to try to get those full 40 hours, right? As more employees turn to third-party staffing agencies to provide their labor, and then there's the financial incentive on their part to keep the work hours below levels that trigger requirements for benefits. Unions have always had powerful enemies, but today there is a new focus on unions that represent public sector workers, because that's where a lot of the unionism is in America today. So they're targeting something called fair share, and we're going to be talking about that today because the Supreme Court has just agreed to hear a case that could eliminate fair share, and that could be a really big deal, a major blow to what remains of unionism in America. And here to help us understand that is a guy who knows about unions in America. We're talking about Anders Lindall from AFSCME, and I'm really happy to have you at the table for the first time. Thanks for coming.
I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
Okay, so you're the American Federation of State, County, Municipal Employees. We all know you by the name AFSCME. You represent a lot of Americans.
Yeah, so we have more than 1.5 million members nationwide. Here in Illinois, 100,000 active and retired public service workers. That's state and county and city employees all over Illinois. It's also employees of public universities and thousands of folks who work in not-for-profit private sector agencies that are publicly funded, providing human services like mental health care, drug treatment, and more. And of course, our governor can't say AFSCME without kind of spitting at the same time, because he doesn't like unions, and he especially, I think, doesn't like you guys. So you are in a kind of a dispute with him and with others, and this has led to this whole Supreme Court step. Let's kind of go back and climb the stairs here and see how this all happened, okay? Let's start with this fair share thing. What is fair share, and why is it important? So you often hear folks on the other side, which are, big corporations, wealthy individuals, shadowy right-wing front groups that they fund, like the Illinois Policy Institute here in Illinois. You hear that cabal talking about forced unionism or forced union dues. Now, that's just not true. Under the law, in this country for the past 40 years, based on a unanimous Supreme Court decision of 1977 called ABOOD, if you work in the public service, whether ABOOD, that's correct. Look it up. Yeah. That's correct. If you work in the public service, whether as a teacher, first responder, child protection worker, a correctional officer, what have you, you're not required to join the union, even if you benefit from a union contract. When you're hired on, you have a choice. You want to join the union and sign a union card. Of course, we think that you should, that obviously workers have a stronger voice when they're united, and that we all benefit when working people have that stronger voice, not only to raise wages, have affordable health care and dignity and security in retirement, but to do that for all of us. And in the public service, to have a voice to advocate for better services. Teachers advocate for smaller class sizes. Firefighters advocate for more resources to respond more quickly in emergencies. So we all benefit when public service workers have a stronger voice. Now, you don't have to join the union, but because everybody benefits from the contract, then everybody shares in the cost of negotiating and enforcing that contract. Obviously, there's a cost to have the staff, to have the negotiators, to have the attorneys to litigate. All of that has a cost, and so what fair share is for anybody that objects to the union's political activity on behalf of candidates that support working people, you don't have to pay that portion of dues. You just pay this prorated amount that's called fair share. And what these corporate, wealthy, right-wing special interests want to do is wipe out fair share so that individuals could choose not to join the union, get all the benefits, but pay nothing for it. It's really a scheme to drain the union's resources.
Okay, now we've heard for a long time about right to work. And I think there might be some confusion here. There are states that are called right to work states. What is the difference there? Explain what that is from your perspective.
Well,
obviously, it's not right to work, but
I mean,
that's the name it has.
Right. That was a name that was invented decades ago to try to sell it. And what it really is this exact same type of a scheme where the union in the private sector has to represent folks, but those on the job don't have to join the union or pay anything to support the benefits that they receive. That divides the workforce. It makes the union weaker, it makes the contracts weaker, it lowers standards for everybody, and it gives working people less voice, less say on the job, and less voice in our democracy. What this court case would do is essentially bring that so-called right-to-work regime to the public sector nationwide.
So Abood only covered public sector workers.
Right.
It did not cover private sector workers. So that's the difference then. When you hear the right to work thing, you're basically talking about private sector employment, and this whole mess we're talking about today is the public sector. Now, as I understand it, only about 6% of private sector jobs are unionized at this point in America.
Right, in the private sector. So really what you've seen, if you go back 3-4 decades, these same cabal, the wealthy folks, big corporations and CEOs, right-wing politicians, and the shadowy front groups that they have created and funded behind the scenes. We hear about the Koch brothers, ALEC, the American Legislative Exchange Council, the State Policy Network, and their state-level affiliates like the Illinois Policy Institute and many more around the country. They have imposed a kind of Walmartized vision of work on the private sector. You know, what does that mean? No voice for workers, no union representation, low wages, no health insurance, certainly that you can afford, certainly no pension that provides dignity and security in retirement. And now that they have imposed that on the private sector, the only countervailing force to their vision of America, in which everybody is on their own, runaway income inequality, wages stagnating even though people are working harder and being more productive than ever before, the rich getting richer. That's what they want. The only countervailing vision is put forward by working people in the public service and our unions to say that, no, we believe in the basic bargain of America, that if you work hard, you should have a family-sustaining wage. If you get sick, you shouldn't go bankrupt. When you're ready to retire, you should have some dignity and security in retirement. And working people should be able to pool their resources to have a say and try to balance things out against all the big money in our democracy.
So just as there's been this pressure for decades to allow people in a unionized for-profit company to opt out of union membership, which means you don't have to pay the union dues. And as you say, that just starts the downward spiral, because with fewer representatives on the work floor, that means that the contracts don't have to be as strong, the management is scared of the union, and it all begins to devolve. This mirrors that, because what they're saying is, if you work in the public sector, you don't have to pay this fair share, which has been mandated essentially for 40 years by the Supreme Court.
Well, it hasn't been mandated, but it's been permitted.
Permitted,
So that public employers and unions have the freedom to negotiate a fair share agreement.
And that exists in about half the states, I understand. Yeah. So many states even don't have that. But Illinois is one that has had fair share, and now the governor and others want to get rid of that.
Right. And
okay. No, go ahead.
Well, a big piece of what's being contested here, I think, comes down to a word I just used, freedom. You'll hear it as a buzzword that has tried to be appropriated and co-opted by these corporate and wealthy interests, that they want workers to have the freedom. Not to pay
not to
anything for the
negotiate
benefits.
for better wages and benefits. They want to have that freedom.
There you go. And we agree it's about freedom, but that freedom is really a much more expansive concept. If you don't have the ability to support your family on the wage you earn from the work you do, are you truly free? If you don't have the ability to take your kid to the doctor when they're sick, you're not truly free. When you don't have the ability to look forward to some dignity and security in retirement, you're not truly free. And increasingly in this country, as the economy and our politics have become so rigged and tilted in favor of the wealthy few, we think that working people need a stronger voice more than ever before in order to be truly free.
I found it interesting in the last, well, I don't know how many years it's been, but certainly in the last decade or so, that there's been a real effort on the anti-union side to try to convince the people who have lost their union representation and their, I would say, their subsequent benefits, to feed this line into the public discourse that look at these greedy public servant people, these cops and teachers and garbage collectors and stuff. They're all getting pensions and they're getting raises, and you're not getting any of that. You need to help us fight to take the benefits away from them, rather than it being the other way around. I mean, I've never understood why so much of the American public has been buying that. It doesn't make sense. But of course, the argument that there is a powerful argument that our taxes keep going up, and in part our taxes are going up because salaries of unionized people are going up. It's a tough argument to make when people are in the dire straits that they're in our country today.
Well, Ken, you're absolutely right that that is the line that this, corporate, wealthy, far-right cabal has been feeding. And I think that there is kind of received wisdom, maybe more so among the commentariat, opinion leaders, that has taken purchase in our country. I think that I would dispute that, and that the data, the facts really would back me up on that. Folks understand the importance of the public services that AFSCME members and other public service union members provide. We're talking about, firefighters, caregivers, nurses, teachers. In our case, child protection workers, folks who keep our air and water clean, work in our libraries, and so much more. People value those services, and people still believe in that basic bargain of America that not only when you work hard you should be able to sustain a family and get ahead, but that we all do better when we all do better. And I think the folks at the very top are trying to turn us against one another and build that politics of
we all
resentment.
do better when you don't do better. And we also own the means of communication, so we're going to communicate that all we possibly
can. But if you look at, Gallup does an annual survey of American attitudes about the labor movement, and those numbers have been on an upward trajectory ever since the Great Recession. I think really shook people up and made them realize how deeply insecure too many working people are in this economy. Folks are slipping down the ladder to the middle class, trying to hang on to what they've got, unable to get ahead. And that, in this country, that's just not what we were ever raised to believe. You should be able to do better than your folks did, and your kids should be able to do better than they did. And that's why 2/3 of Americans today, in this most recent Gallup poll just out a couple months ago, say they think that unions are a good thing. Large percentages say that they would join a union if they could. And really interestingly, the younger someone is, the higher their approval of the labor movement is.
That is interesting, because that at least gives you some hope for the future,
Right.
I guess, maybe. Let's talk specifically about what's happened. In the few minutes we have left, let's try to paint this picture. So you are the defendants in a case that is going to be heard by no less than the Supreme Court of the United States of America.
That's right.
Now that the new justice is on the court, it looks like the balance is changing or going back to where it was. Governor Rauner issued a statement the other day saying that his lawyers have told him that they have a 90% chance of having the Supreme Court vote in their favor, which means you guys are screwed if that happens.
Well, if this case is decided based on the law and the facts, the precedent of 40 years ago,
oh, please,
there's no merit to the case. If the case is decided on the basis of the ideological or political makeup of the court,
I choose B.
The Trump court, then it's a grave threat, and we can't sit back and wait to see what happens and then try to respond or recover. That's why we're out there, not just AFSCME, but I think every public service union in Illinois and around this country, talking to our members, making sure they understand what's really happening here, that this is a blatant political attack on the rights and freedoms of working people to join together, to negotiate together for a better life for all of our communities, and that when those forces come 6 months, 12 months from now and say, you should split away from the union, you should drop out of the union and you won't have to pay a penny, that our members will understand what's really happening here, and they'll stick to the union in even greater
Because that's an
numbers.
important point. It doesn't actually legally shut down the union, it just undercuts its ability to raise the money to continue to succeed. Let's talk a little bit about this specific case. The case is called Janus v. AFSCME.
Right.
Right? Who is Janus?
So there's an individual who's one state employee out of the 75,000 that we represent who was recruited by the Illinois Policy Institute, the right-wing group that was funded by Bruce Rauner, that has recently staffed up his entire administration. If you back up to when Bruce Rauner took office, one of his first official actions in February of 2015, his executive order number 1 was trying to block fair share in Illinois. Now that was blatantly illegal. Fair share is in all of the public sector union contracts, it's in Illinois statute, and it's
verified by the Supreme Court.
It's absolutely.
Yeah.
So that was blatantly illegal. All the unions went to state court, and that executive order was thrown out. Rauner went to federal court and sought a ruling supporting his executive order on this constitutional grounds. He was actually dismissed by the judge from that suit for not having standing. And the Illinois Policy Institute asked, they've got another front group. They don't ever want you to know who they are, who's really operating here behind the scenes. They've got a front group called the Liberty Justice Center, Orwellian choice of words.
Right.
But they recruited this individual state employee to serve as the front, the named plaintiff for this case. They actually didn't try to even make a case in either trial or appellate court. They were just trying to fast track it to the U.S. Supreme Court, because it's really just a Trojan horse to try to get before what they believe is an ideological Trump majority that's going to rule in their favor and gut the rights of working folks.
So that's how it got there.
That's right.
That's how it rather quickly got to the United States Supreme Court.
That's right, and that is the direct tie to Bruce Rauner and to these right-wing front groups like the Illinois Policy Institute that Rauner has funded, that the Koch brothers fund, that exist all across the country. They have a parent organization called the State Policy Network, and The Guardian newspaper recently published an expose of internal fundraising documents from the IPI's State Policy Network parent, in which they let the mask slip a little bit. Rather than their approved talking points about how this was going to be great for working folks, what they were saying in these internal documents was, this case is about striking a mortal blow to unions, that this case is about defunding unions. And, you know, Bruce Rauner has said similar things, again, when he thinks only his right-wing friends are listening. He did a television interview with the Hoover Institution, another front group funded by the Koch brothers, in which he said that this case has nothing to do with the budget. He admitted it has nothing to do with reform. He said that it has to do with power, changing the power structure. They're Bruce Rauner's words. And what he means is less power for working people in the public service, less say, more power for him and his billionaire friends.
So he's put his cards on the table. He says he's got a 90% chance of getting it through the Supreme Court. What are you saying?
Well, what we saw is that there was a similar case to this called Friedrichs that was brought 2 years ago, and it came before the court at a time when Justice Scalia was on the court, so he heard the case, but then he passed away before the decision was made. There was a subsequent decision among the 8 surviving justices, and it deadlocked 4-4. So we have a pretty good idea of where those 8 justices are, and we certainly believe that Gorsuch is as pro-corporate
that
as
would have
Scalia,
meant that Kennedy voted with the conservatives then, right?
That's correct.
So Kennedy,
I mean, one could, we don't know.
The most important man in the history of America, the guy who decides everything about our lives, apparently didn't vote on your side.
Well, you know, these cases like gutting the Voting Rights Act, like Citizens United, these cases that have so served to rig our system to benefit the wealthy few at the very top and to harm working folks nationwide, have consistently been decided on this 5-4 ideological majority.
So really there's really no reason for the other 8 to even show up for the arguments. I mean, they might as well just meet with Kennedy, and both sides meet with Kennedy and try to convince him, because he's going to decide it.
Well, we don't know what's going to happen.
Well, you're not telling me you think Neil Gorsuch is going to switch sides, are you?
We expect that they will hear it in the early part of 2018, and there will be a decision by June of next year. And you know, that's why I think we're all out there.
And that'll be in a very political environment when that happens too.
That's true. We're out there talking to our members and making sure they understand that, you know, this is a political attack and what's really at stake.
Anders, thank you so much. Thanks for coming by. It's a very important conversation, and we'll be following up with you on it. And
thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Anders Lindall is with AFSCME, and the case is called Janus v. AFSCME. Again, look it up. It's worth your time to understand what's going on there. You've been watching Chicago Newsroom. It's a public service of CAN TV right here, and we are glad that you're watching the show, and thank you very much. We will see you again, perhaps next week or another time. Don't forget, you can look at any time at all of our shows by going right here to this address, and we hope you'll do that. Okay? Thanks for now. Bye-bye.